For the next, moving on to the next session, we have symposium on nutrition in special renal population. To chair the symposium, we have Professor Dr. D.S. Rana, Chairman and of Department of Nephrology, Sir Gangaram Hospital, New Delhi. We have speakers, Dr. Mehul A. Shah, he's a senior consultant, Apollo Hospital and Little Stars and She Hospitals in Hyderabad. Then Dr. Garima Agarwal, Madam, lead consultant in Department of Nephrology and Renal Transplantation, Manipal Hospitals, Bengaluru. Dr. Arpita Roy Chaudhary, Madam, Professor HOD, Department of Nephrology, NB MCHIP GMAR, Kolkata. And then Dr. Ranjani Muthu, Madam, Senior Consultant Nephrologist, Apollo Hospitals, Chennai. We would like the dignitaries onto the stage.
Good morning to all of you, and many thanks to Dr. Sarunlata and her team for inviting me to be with you this morning. Today's session is very practical, clinical, and we have got 4 expert speakers from various parts of the country who will be able to address this problem based on their experience plus theory. I will request them to do it based on day-to-day experience. And first speaker is Dr. Shah, who is going to speak on pediatrics CKD and addressing the problem of protein, calories, and growth. This is very important as far as children is concerned, especially the growth and diet, So I invite you, Dr. Shah, first, that you deliver your talk first.
Good morning, chairpersons, senior members and friends. At the outset, I would like to thank Swarnalata and the organizing team for the kind invitation. I think over the next 15 minutes, I would just briefly go through the importance of nutrition in reducing the growth retardation in children with chronic kidney disease. So just before starting the topic on protein, calories, and growth in pediatric CKD, how does a child with chronic kidney disease present? As we know, about a third of children with chronic kidney disease who reach end-stage kidney disease have CACUT, that is the congenital anomalies of the kidney urinary tract, as the underlying cause. Children would often present with failure to thrive. They may have polyuria, polydipsia, constipation, and vomiting as part of their CACUT phenotype. Some of them may present with delayed physical milestones or weakness. There could be unexplained anemia, or there could be vitamin D resistant rickets. The second group are children with preterm birth, as well as those with intrauterine growth retardation. They are at risk for chronic kidney disease, especially in the second, third, fourth decade of life. And as we all know, children with steroid-resistant nephrotic syndrome, those with chronic glomerulonephritis, some of them, with severe acute kidney injury, and some nephrotoxic agents used over a prolonged period can progress to chronic kidney disease. So growth failure in children with chronic kidney disease is a very common and important problem. Now, short stature at the time of dialysis initiation is an independent predictor of poor outcomes, not only for increased hospitalization, but also for mortality. In addition, it has been found that children with chronic kidney disease rank growth as a high priority, especially as they are approaching adolescence. Moreover, adults with chronic kidney disease as children who achieve greater adult height describe a better quality of life. And hence, early intervention is very important for best growth outcomes. Now, we know growth retardation, a hallmark of pediatric chronic kidney disease, affects up to 30 to 50% at diagnosis, and this often correlates with the severity of their chronic kidney disease. What are the key drivers for malnutrition or growth retardation in children with CKD? One, the poor oral intake. As we all know, metabolic acidemia, CKD MBD, anemia, and growth hormone resistance at the cellular level, they all contribute to growth retardation. The critical window here is the first 2 years of life, which are most important to avoid irreversible growth failure. And hence, we need to monitor them regularly for height, weight, and BMI. And one of the early indicators of growth failure would be a height velocity, which goes below the 25th percentile for age and sex. So what are the contributors to growth failure in pediatric chronic kidney disease? We have non-modifiable factors such as age at onset of CKD, the etiology of CKD, severity of CKD, and genetic causes. Of these four, the younger children and severity of CKD are having the most negative impact on a children's growth. In addition to non-modifiable factors, we have modifiable factors, as we discussed briefly: metabolic acidemia, the anemia, the CKD-MBD, growth hormone resistance, and not to mention about the inflammation, which has been discussed not only this morning, but also yesterday. So what are the suggested dietary intake for energy and protein? I think we are all aware about this, that in children with CKD, we do not need to restrict either the calories or protein. In fact, we need to provide them with additional calories to promote growth. And this is the table which is available. I'm not going to go into the detail, but just to surmise that the protein intake varies according to the age of the child. It's not a uniform standard 0.8 grams to 1 grams per kg in an adult. Depending upon the age, we need to go from anywhere from 0.85 to 2.0 grams per kg per day. In children who are very active, they may need an additional 10 to 20% of intake in calories as well as proteins. So what are the protein targets by CKD stage? I've just summarized few of the studies over here. While there were initial reports of protein restriction in adults, as we all know, in the late 80s and 90s in adults, we never had any doubt about restricting proteins in our pediatric patients. There has always been emphasis on liberalizing the protein intake, which is important for maintaining growth and promoting and preventing malnutrition. So the protein intake should be 100 to 140% of the recommended daily allowance in children with CKD stage 3 and 4. In children who are on dialysis, we would need to increase their protein intake, as was discussed again, because of increased losses across the dialysis membrane, both during hemodialysis as well as peritoneal dialysis. On the other side, we need to be aware about the dangers of excessive protein intake, which is often associated with phosphate intake, again, as has been mentioned in the slides earlier by Dr. Dhabi, as well as contribution to metabolic acidosis. So besides adequate nutrition, we need to pay attention to other parameters in order to promote growth. And that means correct metabolic acidosis, especially in children who are not yet reached chronic kidney disease stage 5D or those who are on hemodialysis. Children on peritoneal dialysis would not require bicarbonate supplementation because of the nature of dialysate fluid which we use. Correct anemia, correct CKD, MBD, and target PTH level according to the CKD stage, and sometimes correct the salt deficiency, because 30% of children with end-stage kidney disease have CACUT, and most children with CACUT are salt wasters. So briefly about sodium management, as we know, like in adults, we need to restrict salt not only to control the edema, but also to control the blood pressure. We need to restrict the salt intake to about 2 to 4 grams per day, and this in children involves the entire family. This is one difference between children and adults. When we are talking about a child, we don't restrict the diet only of the patient. We need to modify the family's diet completely in order to improve the compliance and also to minimize the negative effect of a chronic kidney disease in a child. Certainly, as was again mentioned, the packaged foods, the processed foods, the canned foods and fast foods have very high amount of sodium, which is used as preservative, and if they cannot be avoided, definitely they need to be reduced in quantity in order to reduce the salt intake. Use low salt items, checking the labels, as was again mentioned quite clearly in the previous slides. And if possible, use herbs, lemon, spices and pepper to enhance the flavor when we are using a low sodium diet. There are some children with salt wasting conditions, those with hypodysplastic kidneys, those with posterolateral valves before they reach the CKD stage 5D. Children on peritoneal dialysis, especially children less than 2 years, they tend to lose more sodium. And hence, there is no question of sodium restriction. In fact, in young children less than 2 years of age, we often need to supplement them additional salt in order to maintain the sodium balance as well as maintain the blood pressure. I'm not going to go into the detail about phosphorus management. It is almost similar to that in an adult, except that we need to target serum phosphorus of 4 to 6 milligrams per deciliter. We need to allow a positive phosphorus balance to let the cells grow when the child is growing. So what to provide for nutritional needs in a pediatric chronic kidney disease patient? Certainly, in infants, breastfeeding is a preferred method. However, when that's not possible, we prefer whey-based infant formula where the whey protein is very easy to digest. If the calories and proteins are not sufficient, which often becomes the case, we need to concentrate the formula. A typical infant formula is 13%, meaning it has 13 grams per 100 ml. We can gradually increase the concentration to about 20% in order to provide them with additional calories and protein. However, the flip side of concentrating an infant formula is that we are increasing the renal solute load, which can give rise to not only additional urea generation, as well as it can cause osmotic diarrhea, sometimes vomiting, and not to forget about the increased potassium and phosphate load, which comes along with concentrating the formula. We often tend to fortify formulas by adding glucose polymers, medium chain triglyceride oil, or sometimes human milk fortifiers in children less than 1 year of age. Again, the danger is that this human milk fortifier has a very high amount of potassium in it. And certainly, we have special formulas in infants more than 1 year of age, which have low potassium, low phosphorus, high protein and high calories, which are now freely available, and we should make use of them. So how do we provide nutrition in children with CKD? Certainly, per oral route is always preferred. However, majority of our children, especially infants, have poor oral intake due to multiple factors. Because of uremic nausea, metabolic acidosis, which suppresses the appetite, anemia, number of pills which we prescribe to our children, or sometimes we may need to restrict fluid intake in children who are oligoanuric, or it may be the other side where children with tubulopathies tend to have more salt and water wasting. So how do we address this issue? And the answer here is the use of gastrostomy tube. So in whom should we consider gastrostomy tube feeding? Certainly children who have got inadequate nutritional intake and who are malnourished. Most of these children are below 2 years of age. However, children between 2 to 5 or 2 to 10 years may also be considered for placement of a gastrostomy tube. And how do we do that? There are two ways of putting a gastrostomy tube. One is we put the surgeons puts the gastrostomy tube at the time of PD catheter placement, and after the tract has formed, we change it to a G button, or sometimes our gastroenterologist can put an endoscopically gastrostomy tube. We often give 30 to 50% of the total calorie and protein requirement through G-tube. Again, after ensuring that the child is taken orally well, we don't want to suppress their oral route. Various formulas can be given through it. Are there any dangers of using G-tube feeding in children, especially when they are on peritoneal dialysis? Yes, theoretically, there is an increased risk of peritonitis, but a lot of studies have found it not to be significant when compared with children who are not on G-tube feeding. Sometimes the G-tube is placed after peritoneal dialysis catheter. This is one area where there can be an increased risk of peritonitis, and hence we always prefer a simultaneous G-tube and PD catheter placement. One, the PEG before PD policy is something which we are encouraging in most of our patients. When both the tubes are placed and when dialysis is not necessary immediately, we prefer to wait for 2 to 3 weeks to both let the PD site as well as the gastrostomy site to be healed, and then start both gastrostomy tube feeding and peritoneal dialysis. Having said that, can we put the gastrostomy tube in children after dialysis has been initiated? Yes, we can do that. There are studies where they have found that we can mitigate the risk of infection. And can G-tube feeding really be helpful? A lot of studies have found improvement in weight, height, and BMI. There are some studies which have not found, but majority of studies have found it to be useful. Let me just take through 2 cases over here. This is now a 5 years old young girl who presented to us at 9 months with oligoanuric CKD stage 5 due to infantile nephronophthisis. We initiated her on dialysis. We insisted on putting a G-tube, but some of the family was not ready at that point. She was having significant failure to thrive. We had to revise the catheter at 2.5 years because of external cuff extrusion, and this time the family agreed to put the G-tube, and with that we were able to see a significant improvement in her growth, both in the height and the weight percentile. This is another patient, a 3 years old boy who came in with PUV and chronic kidney disease stage 5. This family agreed to place the G-tube at the time of PD catheter placement, and we could see we were able to give him almost 250 ml of the renal formula, which provides 500 calories and 20 grams of protein, and there was a significant increase in his growth percentiles, crossing above 25th percentile. PD can be placed in children after peritoneal dialysis. The risk of peritonitis is low if we do a proper G-tube placement, antibiotic and antifungal prophylaxis for about 7 days. This small case study did not find any statistically significant risk of peritonitis before and after PD catheter and before the G-tube placement. However, G-tube placement is not just necessary for children. There have been case reports where even adults who have been on peritoneal dialysis have benefited from G-tube placement. And final few slides on role of growth hormone in pediatric chronic kidney disease. A number of studies have shown beneficial effect of growth hormone in CKD stages 3 to 5. It is more effective in CKD stages 3 to 4 as compared to CKD stage 5D and in children who are prepubertal. This has been recently confirmed by the International Pediatric Peritoneal Dialysis Network study. Even though some of these patients were not having satisfactory calorie intake, there was a positive impact of growth hormone therapy. So what is the pathophysiology of growth hormone resistance in children with chronic kidney disease? Multiple factors. The most important is the decreased growth hormone receptor expression in the target organs as well as liver, the reduced bioactivity of IGF-1 level, the elevated IGF binding protein 3, which has a negative effect on IGF-1, and the effect on growth plate metabolism. We should use it when children are having significant growth failure, height less than 3rd percentile or height velocity less than 25th percentile, or CKD stage 3 to 5. If it's used in children post-renal transplant, as we all know, we wait for at least 1 year. Before initiating growth hormone therapy, the prerequisites should be met. Correct the metabolic acidosis, correct anemia, correct CKD-MBD, and ensure there is adequate delivery of proteins and calories. The dosing, I'm not going to discuss about it, but we need to monitor them for height velocity, and at least a 2 centimeter per year increase in growth before starting of growth hormone therapy should be considered as a positive result. Duration is at least 2 to 3 years and sometimes longer. In case if there is no adequate growth, we need to discontinue that. So to summarize, growth retardation is a hallmark of pediatric chronic kidney disease affecting 30 to 50% of children. Besides decreased oral intake, metabolic acidosis, anemia, CKD-MBD, and growth hormone resistance are key drivers of malnutrition and growth retardation. Early intervention in first few years is critical for improved results. Energy requirement should be 100 to 120% of RDA. Protein restriction is not recommended. In fact, protein intake should be 100 to 120% of RDA. Infants and young children with CACUT are salt wasters and they often require additional salt supplementations. Gastrostomy tube placement should be initiated in young children with failure to thrive and undergoing initiation of peritoneal dialysis. And finally, growth hormone therapy can be considered in select children after ensuring reversible factors are taken care of. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Shah. You will all agree with me that Dr. Shah has taken care of all aspects of nutrition requirement and role in maintaining growth and preservation of renal function in pediatric population. You will agree that practically all principles are similar, but here maintenance of growth overpowers over the preservation of renal function, and so there is hardly any role of protein restriction. And in fact, if you require, in certain cases, you have to use growth hormone. I think he has already consumed his time, and there is hardly any time for questions. So I will invite the next speaker.